Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. Brownlow, I'm actually in my brother's, I don't even know what to call it. It's like his aerospace engineering lair, right? I'm in here in Florida for Thanksgiving, and I thought I had experienced some wild moments on some of the roller coasters I've been on at Universal, like the Velocicoaster, where you experience some weightlessness at some time and some inversions, some nuttiness, and you come out of it going, what the hell did I just experience?
The music one at Universal?
The Rip Rocket thing.
They shut that down when I was there one time for wind, and I was like, "You are insane if you think I'm riding a thing that they just had to shut down for wind." Never did.
You know what was wilder than that? The NC State North Carolina game that just wrapped up at Carter Finley Stadium. We've seen some insane things between these two teams over the last 20 some odd years, right? But to see NC State come back in this game when a lot of people, including myself, between you and me and our text messages, had this thing pretty much wrapped late in the third quarter.
You want to tell me when you texted me and said it's a wrap? And I made fun of you?
Actually, I think I sent you that text in the second quarter.
Yeah, maybe. Which I was also like, come on.
Maybe. No, but mainly because I'd seen this movie before. But
except we forgot the other side of the movie. This is what happens when you combine franchises, right? It gets a little confusing to stay true to who everybody is. UNC does that all the time, too.
This is true, but I actually thought early on that NC State. Okay, I feel like we have to start from the beginning here with how this all played out. NC State had two blocked punts. One of them ended up as that scoop and score. The other one ended up as a first down for North Carolina. You don't see that very often. I actually thought one of the bigger turning points in the game was Emeka Emezi's missed. He had the ball go right through his hands. Yeah. I think it was on a third down conversion that would have.
It was kind of a toughish throw, but you would expect him to get it.
It was, and Emezi ends up making the great catch at the end to win this whole thing. So there's redemption on that end. But there were little things here and there where I thought NC State could just put North Carolina away, just put a stamp on it, even though North Carolina's made a habit of making comebacks in the fourth quarter. But they let North Carolina hang around. And on top of that, you saw North Carolina getting breaks too. We mentioned the punt, right? The block punt. There was also, the first down that ended up happening where I think it was, and also you have guys that you don't hear from all season long, right?
But you could argue that you should have.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. Because I'm with you on that. So guys you haven't heard from all year long are having big games. Was this Olsen kid has this huge touchdown. You're just thinking you know what? North Carolina's just getting the breaks tonight at Carter Finley Stadium, and NC State's going to have another one of these moments. Instead, it was NC State getting all the breaks, which you don't see all that often, and they come out with the win. And I would argue this was probably Dave Doran's biggest win, bigger than the Clemson game earlier this year for a lot of narrative purposes, which we can get to in a second.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to that. Certainly the way it played out. I think we all agree that if they just beat them in a fairly routine game, we wouldn't be saying that. But look, I mean, I've told you, I've said this in this space before. I think NC State under Doran, the program has just, to me, matured a ton in the last 2 years, last year and this year. And I know that, I know they've taken some losses that they'd rather not have taken, and I get it. But at the same time, they just keep bouncing back. They never let one loss turn into two. Even in games, they keep fighting. And so, to me, that matters. And North Carolina right now has no idea how to do things like that, really. They have one guy who does, and he can't win it by himself. He tried.
He tried. He really tried. And I know there was I saw some of this on my timeline where it was now NC State fans know how North Carolina fans felt when Russell Wilson was doing some insane things, right? Sam Howell was carrying that team on his back. And to your point, I know you had tweeted this out earlier, where Sam Howell's season did not go the way that a lot of people anticipated. Not even he could anticipate, right? But he never actually backed down. If anything, he only worked harder. And if you don't come away from this regular season without more respect for Sam Howell, I'm not quite sure what you watched if you watched North Carolina football this year. If you want to pick on the coaching staff, if you want to get on Mac Brown, fine, you're well within your rights to do so. But as far as Sam Howell's game, I know there was a point early this season where he was not living up to the expectations. If you tuned out after that, you missed
early.
It was pretty early. If you tuned out after that, you missed out on a hell of a regular season by Sam Howell.
And you know what?
And my respect has only gone up for him.
NFL GMs may tend to make bad decisions here and there. We all understand that.
Yeah.
I find it very hard to believe that once they sit down and look at the totality of Howell's season, that he's going to take as much of a hit as they're acting like he's going to. I'm just saying. And
yeah, I'm with you on that.
His numbers are not that different. You know, they're really not. And he's added rushing to the equation, like just out of nowhere. He had like less than 200 yards total in his career before this year. Like the dude, he was just trying to ball out as much as he could. And, you know, it's a little bit difficult when your O-line's suspect at times, although I thought they mostly played pretty well in this game, which I was not expecting.
Yeah, I thought they did. I thought their defense did. I thought their defense stepped up. I thought their offense adjusted after NC State was smothering them early on in this game. But again, flip side of that, where NC State also was down on themselves, and you thought that North Carolina was just absolutely taking it to them. But it follows a Dave Doeren. It's been following Dave Doeren since last season. You can track this all the way back to last season, where there have been a very resilient group, and you mentioned it. They don't necessarily allow things to get to them more than once, sometimes even within the game. So they stuck with it. I know Dave Doeren said after the game that the onside kick wasn't necessarily a lesson learned from the Wake Forest game. I don't buy that. I'm sure that's in the immediacy of it, but I felt like lessons had been learned from the Wake Forest game because they waited for that football to cross the 10 yards rather than being just that half second early like we saw in the Wake Forest game a while back. But I wanted to highlight this more than anything else and kind of get to my point about why this win for Dave Doeren was bigger than the win against Clemson. And a lot of it had to do with the way that Doeren had talked about this team and the program over the last 2 years and the word respect, right? Mm-hmm. Or disrespect. And I think the week leading up to this game, Gilio and I talked about this. The mask was off. We can actually now, with the game week against North Carolina, talk about what this is really, what all of this was about. It's about Mack Brown recruiting and the television absolutely loving North Carolina, right?
Right.
While they've had a good story themselves. So you've spent all season long building this talking point to get to this game against North Carolina while they're having a down season. And you can absolutely make the emphatic point crystal clear about how that program isn't so far ahead of you as a program and what you've built at NC State. But you have to do that with a win. Now, the game ends up being a wild one. And I think a lot of people have to go back and delete their tweets after some of the things that they were saying earlier in this game about Dave Doeren and the coaching staff and anything else. But that's neither here nor there. The point is they won the game in dramatic fashion. And maybe in the way that they won it, it proves a larger point that Dave Doeren has a program that buys into what he's trying to do with this resiliency. So with the win, 3 years into the Mack Brown tenure, you show it's cool that you get all this publicity, but you still can't get over on us despite the fact that you've got this generational guy and Sam Howell quarterback. You got all these 4- and 5-star recruits, and you got the backing of all the people who thought you were going to be a top 10 team, right? We still managed to beat you. That's an important thing for Dave Doeren and what turns what could have been a good season with missed opportunities into what could actually be a very great season with a bowl win potentially that gets up to 10 wins. They didn't lose at home. All these things. Mississippi State was a disappointment. I get that. They had an opportunity to win the Atlantic Division against Wake Forest. It looks like Wake, we see what happens against Boston College. We're recording this before Saturday's game. All these things still check the boxes off for a great season. And you got to come away just being impressed by what Doeren's done this year.
Well, and let me say this too. Candace Cooper and I hosted your show on Friday, or well, not Friday, whatever the last day of the week.
Wednesday.
I don't even know
on
what day
Wednesday.
it is.
It's fine.
Wednesday. And one thing we both agreed on wholeheartedly was like, all right, listen. Okay, State and Wake. If one of y'all can't do this year, stop complaining about your division. None of us want to hear it anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
And by the way, what you play? State plays 2 coastal teams, right? One of the coastal teams beat them. The other one arguably should have. So let's not pretend like you would definitely fare much better in another league. Would it be easier to win the league? Yes, but would you maybe take more L's? Possibly. We just don't know. And so, that's all I'm saying. And so kudos to them for doing what they need to do, taking care of business. They have knocked Clemson out of this equation, correct? Like Clemson's done now.
Clemson is done.
So there you go.
Clemson is done. We'll see what happens against Boston College because, again, NC State still is in the possibility of winning the Atlantic Division. Now, about North Carolina. I really don't know how else to put it. That was the cherry on top of a terrible Sunday, melted Sunday, for Mac Brown this season. And I know that earlier in the year he talked about, well, y'all put us in the top 10. No. This was a year in which you were supposed to break through with Sam Howell. You don't get a guy like that every time. Drake May might be a really, really good quarterback, but I think you might look back on the Sam Howell years and wonder what could have been.
Well, and while we're drawing parallels, I think NC State fans still feel that way a lot about Philip Rivers.
Yep. No, I'm with you on that. Or they feel that way about Russell Wilson, where they went up against Maryland and ended up losing that game as a missed opportunity. Point being, there's no other way to spin this season for North Carolina other than bad. Straight up bad. They missed the mark. They did not meet expectations. This completely recalibrates how you look at that program going forward. Yes, they can get the recruits. Yes, they're going to get the publicity. But they actually haven't shown you anything yet that they can be believed as an actual contender. They might do that one day. I'm simply saying that hopefully this is a lesson for people to look more skeptically at this kind of stuff going forward. But why I say this makes it even worse, this one's going to hang for a bit. Because did you see the win probability? Because I was watching the game with my brother and his friends were all texting around.
That's what made me think of that roller coaster at Universal, the one that has that huge drop.
Yes.
Music was shut down via wind because that is what that drop looks like.
Here's the win probability that ended up showing up on the ESPN app, right?
Look at that roller coaster drop. Oh my God.
Seriously, I don't know if there's an inversion there or not, but regardless, North Carolina was at 99.9% win probability. 99.9% win probability when you saw that highest peak. And then obviously you know the rest of the story.
You know what these records are? You have that stat?
I was going to say, here's the other stat. This is from ESPN Stats and Information. Let me pull this up on the screen share here. This is when I saw this, I had to read it a couple of times because I didn't quite understand the gravity of this. But NC State trailed by 9 with 2:12 left to play in the fourth quarter versus North Carolina. Obviously, they come back to win. The first team to win a game when trailing by 9 with less than 2:30 to play. Teams have been 0-451 in this scenario. That's a bad way to lose. And making matters even worse, while everybody was obsessing over whether or not NC State was melting down, it ended up being North Carolina that melted down with what have we seen all season out of this North Carolina team, Lauren? Inopportune penalties, sloppy play, lack of focus, all that came through. All that came through in the last 2 minutes of that game. And at this point in the year, you'd think they'd be over those types of things. Clearly not, and it happened in such a dramatic fashion that it highlights everything else bad that happened this season. And again, that reflects poorly on Mac Brown. I really don't know else. I really have no other way of putting it other than that's a bad L for Mac after what was supposed to be a breakthrough year.
Yeah, I mean, to lead by that many with 2:12 to go, and then I actually was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to eat some crow because you know how I feel about the game where the Panthers went up by 6 against the Bills, and E.J. Manuel led a game-winning drive on them. Jimbo Fisher didn't even trust E.J. Manuel.
Yeah.
And the Panthers had no one left in the secondary, and I'm like, what are you actually doing right now? And I kind of was wondering that for UNC, and I actually think that maybe the last couple weeks against ACC teams may have spooked Mac a little bit on that. You know, when they've had fourth downs and stuff, they weren't getting them. When they've had short yardage situations, when they've been in the red zone, they haven't been successful. And I wonder if he kind of became a little spooked there and was like, I don't know. You know what I mean? And that came into my mind because he was very aggressive on going for it on fourth downs before. And then this week, all of a sudden, it was playing it a little more cautious. There were a lot of clenched butt cheeks in this football game.
Well, I mean,
on both sides.
I called that a couple of weeks ago after NC State lost to Wake Forest. Looking ahead to this game, there were going to be, as Bomani Jones likes to joke about, there was going to be a lot of lemon moody going in this game. For all the reasons we just talked about, from what this meant to Dave Doran and how the season had played out and how he'd been talking about things and how he badly needed to beat this North Carolina team given the year that they had, and how badly Mac Brown needed to salvage this year. I mean, because one of the things I had jotted down, I guess we can kind of wrap on this. One of the things that I jotted down about how this game was playing out or how the season was going to play out for both these teams was that Mac Brown salvaged a season with a state championship, while Dave Dorn was going to have another potentially great season reduced to a good season that a lot of people will look at as like an empty potential 9-win year with a bowl win, right?
Right.
And when I say salvage, I'm not calling Mac Brown trollish, but Mac Brown knows how to spin a quote and get people going, right?
And here's the other part of that too, right? Let's say, because, Candace brought up this question when she and I were co-hosting on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. How do we view North Carolina's season differently if they win this game? And
that's what I'm saying.
About it for a long time, and I'm kind of saying. I'm like, I don't know. And then I started thinking more and more, and I'm like, Mac would spin this absolutely in just the way that you said. And then assuming they played well in their bowl game with or without Sam, then everybody would have the same kind of feeling about them coming into the next year. So maybe in some ways it's actually like a blessing in disguise that they're not going to go into next year with all this hype.
Yeah, maybe it is a blessing in disguise, because to what you guys were talking about, the way it would have played out had North Carolina won, it would have been, we had the state championship. Right. Wake could win the Atlantic Division. All this other stuff. You can say whatever you want about our season, but nobody in the state of North Carolina could get over on us. So what does that say about you? I mean, that's ultimately what he's saying. Oh, you think we're crap, but you still couldn't beat us. And that's the ultimate salvaging of a year, basically putting the best face you can put on for what has been a disappointing season. But that's been ripped away, and it got ripped away in a really bad, dramatic way there at the end. And NC State will obviously be enjoying this one for a while. I know Dave Dorn will be enjoying this one for a while too, because I know after the game he did talk about he'll enjoy the fact that he doesn't have to hear from those guys in blue for another year, which a lot of that.
That's as saucy as he got. I was recording UNC, so I couldn't be on.
I was gonna say, I think that's about as. I think he's gonna let. I want to say the impression that I got was. I think he's letting the win do the talking more than anything else, especially given the way he had talked about how the season had gone on. So
I'm glad there was no prop bet on like what would Dave Doran's speech have been if they'd won. A la the dry cleaner speech.
Oh,
I'm glad I didn't bet on that, because I would have lost all my money. That he would have made a speech like that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, a big thanks to North Carolina and NC State for delivering on the local level once again. I know, I know there's better football played. I know there was a lot of flags. I know there was a lot of missteps.
But
things like that.
That's college football played.
That's college football.
And by the way,
that's college football.
Honestly, the refs I thought were mostly fine.
They're fine.
Mostly, I mean, you could quibble with some calls, but it's not like some games we've seen. It was nothing that bad.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll see you all next week.